All right, Cyber Patriots, this is Daniel again, and we're going to take a look at Cisco technology. This is the first of the Cisco courses. We're in the first module, first chapter within the first module. What we'll do is we'll be walking through some of these a bit. I'll just give some tips on, honestly, some things that are a good use of time in their activities and exercises, and some other things that I think you could save some time in. Skip and maybe expand a little bit on some of the stuff that they talk about in this first course. So we can do this. Everyone can go through the content as we get set up. View this. I'll give some tips on good uses of time as you go through the course. And then we'll come back and maybe do some conference call type stuff, or even during class, answer some questions and get ready for the things that they're going to do to us when we have competition time. So what we're looking at is I've signed on to the Cisco environment, the Network Academy environment. This is the home page here, and of course it's organized. It's easy to navigate. It can be a little bit awkward. They use the they use a actually it's an outsourced model that they use. You'll see later that they're hosting on Amazon, and then they're using a learning environment called Canvas. And any of you that's ever had any experience with Liberty Online materials, it should be very familiar with the dashboard over here in this menuing system, because it's the same thing that Liberty Online uses. So we're going to click on launching the course. Or actually, let's take a look at modules first. So within the modules, that's the major blocks. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a whole bunch of these. I think there are 19 modules total. I think we might have talked about that in the prior video. We're going to get through chapter 1 within the first module in this one. So there's a couple of chapters in the packet tracer tool that's in the first module. The second module gets into some terms and concepts. We'll try to get through those quickly because it's modules 3 and then the next few after that that we'll see that are what we will have to deal with in terms of the questions we'll ask us when we compete in the first round. But we need to understand the basic concept before the other stuff's going to make any sense. So I'm going to go back to the home, and then I'm going to launch the course, and I'm going to skim through these. I'm not going to go through every bit of it. That's why you have an account and you can read through and work through it. But I just want to touch on a few things, try to make sure it's makes all the sense that it should, and maybe get best usage of your time. So we start on module 1. I'm going to launch chapter 1, ITN, Introduction to Networking. I'm going to click on the launch chapter 1 link, and here is the first slide. So you can keep up with where you are. We're in chapter 1. 1.0 is introduction, 101 welcome, 101 is this particular slide. And you kind of see this scroll through as we go. First couple of things, actually a lot of this stuff is honestly just fluff, going through that. I will say on that second one, drawing your concept of the internet, I'm not sure that's a great thing to spend a lot of time on. You can if you want after you read this, but not to me a whole lot of learning value there. Quick video that they'll show about the network in daily lives. That's fine, but not essential. This humanity thing, it's fine if you want to watch that video, not super essential. And then some more kind of like making networking practical to us, and then how networking can affect learning capabilities. Watch that if you want to. It's fine, not essential. And then some more stuff about trying to connect networking with real life. And it's a good thing they're doing, that they're talking about how stuff that we use every day, that there's networks behind it. And so they're giving you some context with real life for tools that we use every day, so that you kind of have some more context when we get into the nuts and bolts of how those bits actually move around from your phone or your computer to where they need to go. Some more content. Okay, now we get into a lab, and the lab they do here, honestly, I don't recommend getting too far into that. It's going to be getting into collab tools, going on to Gmail and creating a stuff on Google Drive and sharing it with someone else. And that's fine if anyone wants to do that. I think just about everybody on the team uses a Gmail account of some sort. You can do that. Good exercise. That's fine. Don't think it's necessarily going to be competition essential. So definitely optional exercise there. Now we get into a little bit of the real deal stuff. Talking about networks of sizes and so forth. So definitely read through this, get the idea. Getting into clients and servers. Some of this stuff from a logical standpoint should look and sound familiar. We've seen physical switches in class before. We've talked about that. And then these client endpoint capability servers and machines and webs and email and so forth. So familiar there. And again, they're going to get some more stuff about networking. That's good stuff to read. I'm not going to go into detail there. Then some networking components. Definitely pay attention here. There's some exercises where they're going to quiz you on that. Understanding devices, media, and services, and they kind of highlight as you go through each of those. Definitely pay attention on that. In devices, so they're going to unpack what they mean by in devices. Should be pretty self-explanatory. A little further, go into intermediary devices. These are devices that connect other devices together. So you have seen a switch before. We had that one of the early classes. Probably you have a wireless router somewhere in your house, and if you plug a cable into it somewhere, maybe from your cable modem, it actually works like a physical router does. A firewall appliance. We turn on the software firewalls when we're competing on the Windows. But there's a physical device we've talked about before also that could be a firewall. And a multi-layer switch, just a larger unit that's more for a corporate environment. So we'll talk about the intermediate devices. And then the media, copper, what you've seen when we were plugging in the switches in class a couple of times. You may have some copper cable that you use to connect your Wi-Fi router to your cable modem or that sort of thing. Then fiber optic, of course, basically just glass that you'll use. Yeah, you can probably see it if you can find where, if you use the plant board or AT&T, you might be able to see some fiber running outside your house where the connection comes into your house. Usually orange, sometimes yellow cables that smaller, thinner than the copper, and wireless, pretty self-explanatory. And then network representation. So you'll see these little images, and when you get into diagramming networks and diagramming the pieces, good to know each of these types of devices and what they look like on a map. They'll give us some exercises. These would make great candidates for things to put into the questions during competition. And then understanding how they normally do wireless media, LAN media, WAN media, that those are the conventions when you see a network diagram, that you would see wireless media, and maybe you would go from a wireless router, have some of this type of this oscilloscope looking type of a diagram, from a wireless router to a laptop, for example. So just be ready for that on the diagrams, and be ready to label or do something like that in competition as some more definitions. So that's good basic stuff. Everybody's going to need to get ready for that. Now we talk about diagrams, and here is one. And they're showing you R1. That's going to be the main router. Notice how it's kind of central. Switches out here that would, again, be like devices we've seen before that are what let devices plug in from endpoints like these laptops here. And then these servers on the other side. So you would be a person on using this laptop in a classroom, and that wire, if you traced it through the walls of the building like we've talked about, would hit a switch. And then there'd be another cable going from that switch and to this routing device. And then we go to a switch, and then to talk to the web server, a file server, whatever, or maybe something in this IT office, if you're going to send a print job, what have you. That's how the packets go through. And this is kind of physical because it's showing you the rooms and all that, and obviously not to scale, but it's a good example of a diagram when you're trying to look at endpoint devices, intermediate connections. So these are all physically cabled, and then the immediate devices and the endpoint devices and the servers on this side. So good diagram, good start on understanding topology, and we can work through some more of that when we get together. All right, so then here's an activity. The way these work is they do this drag and drop thing. So you move something over to a spot, let it go, do a check, and then it'll tell you if it's right or wrong. If you have trouble getting these right, back up a few slides, reread, and if you still have trouble, that's why I'm here, and we'll talk through it and try to figure it out. But good exercise right here to do a learning check. Now here's some more diagram stuff. Types of networks. They're going to distinguish local area network, where everything's kind of plugged in. Think of inside one building with that. Wide area networks. Wide geographical area owned by a telco. So Frankfurt plant board, something like that. Metropolitan area network. The state actually has what you would consider a MAN. There are about 8 devices around town, or 8 locations around town, like the CHR building and the Cold Harbor building for central IT, and the state police office on Louisville Road, and several others. I think the tower, and I think there are 8 total in Frankfurt, and they make up what's actually a big fiber ring around town that the state government, all the network kind of works through a fiber ring that would be considered a MAN, and it's all in Frankfurt, but it's just those devices and just the state's network traffic, not what I'm connected to at the house right now, or you are where you are. That's a good example of a metro network. Wireless LAN, I'm on one right now here at the house or Starbucks and so forth. Self-explanatory. Storage area network, won't go there. I doubt that's going to show up in competition, but that's where you can actually do networking to connect a whole lot of big storage, like lots and lots and lots of hard drives, all kind of wired together in a corporate environment. Local area networks are going to unpack that a little bit. Just read that. Should be hopefully self-explanatory. And wide area networks shouldn't be too hard a concept there. The internet, again, just means a network of networks is the literal definition, but then the global network of networks that gives us Google and YouTube and all those things is the internet with the capital I. And just to read through that. Intranets and extranets. So an intranet would be the company only. So if you are at your school and the people who are inside the school and work there, they sign on to something to get to stuff. And that's just within the company and just inside the walls, or maybe the people that log on from outside. An extranet is like what we're on right now. We are connected. We had to log on to get to this Cisco environment, and it's their network, their environment, but they let us connect from the internet over a secured connection. We've got the HTTPS, of course, for a secured connection over our browsers, and then we had to sign on. So we're on a Cisco extranet at the moment, and then intranet, the world. That, of course, is the generic internet that we think of with Google and Yahoo and Facebook and everything else that we find out there. Okay, and so then we get into technologies. And then now notice we're got some of our same diagrams, a different kind of a topology here showing how an ISP, like a plant board or an ATU Uverse or what have you, giving connection to a person working from home, a home user sitting at their house doing their thing, a small office or corporate office or what have you. A business level internet connection. So this is what a company would use. This is like, for example, the state, their ISP is an AT&T connection. At Kentucky Housing, it's a plant board connection. Examples like that. Packet tracer we'll deal with a little bit here, but that's the tool that we use to watch traffic over the network. And so instead of just, we click on something and get to a browser, it's kind of seeing what's really going on behind the scenes on the device. Very good troubleshooting, really helps you understand what's happening. So we're going to touch on this portion of it here. We're going to open up this first window. So here's some just help and navigation tips is what they call it. So here's an example topology. And you've got a branch office, a home office, and a central office connected over the intranet and another device for the intranet. So they can talk within their corporate network, but physically traveling across a wide area connection. So that's a nice diagram to explain some concepts. Read some the background here, and that's great. And so then I won't take this and belabor it. But when you get to here, there's some questions to answer. So check those out and check your learning. And those will be, that's a good exercise. Then I think when you get to this one, you actually have to have, that starts a download. To look at that, we need to download the packet tracer tool itself, and we will get to that and look a little bit at packet tracer in another video, so we'll skip that for now. Okay, now again, we'll do the first link, not the second one, because that's a file that you need. I think you need the packet tracer tool itself, which again, we'll defer to later. But another exercise, they're showing a diagram that's very similar or maybe the same things, talking about some exercises, and then they're going to get you to answer some questions. So explain the difference here. How many lands do you see? How many lands do you see? So look through those, see if they make sense, see if you have confidence you have any answers. If you're not sure, back up a few slides and read. If you're still not sure, we'll talk about it and figure it out. So again, good stuff there. Good learning check. Please work through those questions, and we will review when we get together. So here's some more stuff on multiple networks. And they're going to start to get into some communications protocol type stuff here. Different kinds of devices going across different kinds of networks. Probably nothing too competition pertinent yet. Converged networks, good to read on this, good to be aware of it. Probably not significant from a competition standpoint. But you're going to get into things where Back in the old days, when you went to a telephone, it was on its own set of wiring that went through, to its own set of phone switches, and all that was distinct. Whereas the computers were on a different network that were separate from the physical network of the telephones. These days, you've got phones that are on the data network, and it's all in one converged thing, and all that traffic's going through this converged network, and that's been a trend that's been happening for a while, and eventually it'll end up where most of these things are just simply on one set of network gear, and just managed separately, but physically not separated. Okay, researching converged network services from taking the CCNA test. You need to know this. That's not our exact purpose now, so I would honestly skip this exercise. That would be very time consuming, and I do not see how that would be pertinent to a competition, so I recommend we skip that one for now. Can't hurt to look it over. If it's interesting, you can, but again, for our purposes, probably not a great use of time. Okay, network architecture, got an exercise here, probably good to know this. They probably could pull some stunts with questions on it. So learn these 4 terms: fault tolerance, which basically means if something goes wrong, you've got enough backup equipment set up that can continue working. Scalability, which means, well, what if we have a whole lot more usage? Do we have enough stuff in place that we could grow quickly, or would it be hard for us to grow quickly? Quality of service means I might want one thing to be on the network to be prioritized higher than another. For example, if your phones are on your data network, you need to have your phones working very quickly. If a web page takes a little longer to load, that's not a huge deal. If an email gets in a few seconds, even a few minutes slower, not a huge deal. If you've got seconds of lag on a phone conversation, that's not something that's going to be acceptable. So you get into quality of service where you say certain things need to get more priority as they move across the network than other services. And security, of course, well, that's why we're doing this. So learning what's about each of those. So then they unpack each one. There's some fault tolerance discussion, good content there, scalability, QoS, and security. And well, looky there, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, good old CIA. So that's about the 4th place that we've run into that. But when your instructor told you, when the coach said that's a huge concept within security, I wasn't kidding. So there it is again. Should be very familiar to all the cyber patriots at this point, however. All right, there's some questions. So this one, you just kind of click on whichever one of these you think is the right one, and when you get through all of them, you can do a check. It'll tell you if we're wrong. It won't tell you the right answer. You got to figure that out. But it'll walk you through getting these correctly. I definitely would recommend this exercise. That smells very much like something that could show up in the competition. Now the new trends, skim through this. It's good stuff to know, not necessarily competition pertinent. Bring your own device. People bring their home phones and connecting to work networks. Pretty big thing that's happening. Pretty much a hated thing by security people because of the problems it creates, but it's sort of there, so we got to work around it. Online collaboration. Again, this is all good content. In fact, there was even a video if you want to watch it with this one. Which is fine, but this stuff we can probably skim through just a little bit because of not being super pertinent to the competition. Powerline networking is cool. I would read this because it hasn't taken off like it could have. Many years ago, I remember reading about this like it was going to be the thing. But essentially, instead of having to worry about running, network cable or whatever to your house, it was using the power outlets, and you can see their little, and I think there is some application of this. I believe it's taken off somewhat more so in Europe than here, but really it would be handy as all get out because the infrastructure is there. Power is run everywhere. It's already in your house. But I think just the advent of good Wi-Fi has made it not really all that useful. So, but kind of a neat concept, just never quite got the bite in the market that it needed. Okay, there's wireless broadband, good concept, good to know that. And here we go, network security. So a couple of good slides I want you to read for sure here. Viruses runs Trojans, we've talked about those. Spyware, 0 days, we've talked about that a little bit. Hacker attacks, that's what we're about, is going after hacker attacks and making that end. Denial of service attacks, data interception, identity theft. This is getting into what we're about, so read that over. And then security solutions, antivirus, firewalls, access control lists, IPSs, and VPNs. Be great to understand those definitions. I believe they're going to show up in some quiz material later, and they would make great questions for a cyber patriot. And there we go. So there's, again, you just drag these over and do your check and make sure you've got them. If you have some trouble, back up and reread. If you still have trouble, let's talk about it. Cisco network architecture. So now we're going to get into some things where they've taught you in general terms, but we will get into things that are specific to Cisco's devices, like you've got some of the equipment that they're showing off here in this little data center and their impressive picture. And we're going to get into Cisco specific later on. The CCNA, that is the Cisco Certified Network Administrator. And they're just showing this pyramid of the career path of, you know, entry-level job and getting started, and you become a pro, and then you're expert, and you're architect, and that's kind of true in most of the disciplines, whether you're talking about Cisco and network specific, or if you're a Windows Server admin, or if you're a Linux admin, or if you're a security person. To some degree, you could almost, in my opinion, compress this to this entry and associate as like the beginning level. This professional expert is like your tier 2 persons that might be a server admin on the Windows or Linux side, or you might even, I would almost put the word engineer here as opposed to an expert. That's typically what the guys that work for me or when I was in that role. And then you have architects, which I've been in an architecture role before. That's an incredibly fun thing to get into. Actually, a job back was in director of architecture role. But you could almost compress this into 3 things, but what they do here is very good. And they're explaining CCNA, which is not the highest level of certification they have, but it's a very, very good one. And so if you want to, and I'm glad to help you, if you want to work towards looking at this certification, that is definitely on the table, because pretty much you've got the material here, in addition to it being a good thing for your cyber patriot. So here's some job opportunity stuff. If you want to check this out some, you can, but again, in terms of time usage and stuff, it's probably not going to be pertinent to Cyber Patriot, but it can be a good thing for just exploring careers. And we will be, after round 1, I'm going to try to be getting us some outside speakers to talk about networking and IT security job opportunities in the different disciplines, even within IT security. So hopefully have some outside speakers to come in and talk about that too, which might be every bit as pertinent as looking here. But again, can't hurt. Good thing to do. Just maybe not if from purposes of time though, and focusing on our competition. I doubt that's going to come into play. And now they want to have you draw your concept of the internet now. So of course it's nice before and after. You drew it before. The idea being, no offense, maybe you didn't understand the concept. Now, if you've been through all this stuff, it should make a whole lot more sense. You can do that if once you probably a good exercise to think it through. And drawing your idea of the internet, and you've got some of those example diagrams that they have. One thing, I've stretched my screen over a bit, just from an interface standpoint. Little tip: this resize, these 3 dots right here, you can click and hold that, and kind of move this in and out. I moved it over a little bit so it doesn't crowd into the slide too much, but it gives a little more room for the descriptive part. But you got that from just a visibility standpoint, whatever helps there. So getting close to the end of the slide deck, I think here. Warriors of the Net, we might watch that together. It's actually only about 14 minutes, and it's a little bit dated. I think there's talk of making a new one. When we get a chance to have an everybody get together of some sort, which I'm early stages of planning, we'll probably watch that. Or maybe there's also an awesome movie called what's it called? Triumph of the Nerds. We might watch that too. That's a great one about the advent of IT folks within the culture. Okay, now here is same graphic that they started with the intro slide, but it's the concluding slide. And I think this is the last one, and this is chapter 1. Yep, there's chapter 2, configuring a network operating system. We're not going there. So that's chapter 1. Again, go through the stuff, give you some recommendations on where to put some time. Definitely do the exercises that involve the drag and drop type thing. And if you have any questions, back up, check it out again. Google is your friend as always, and so am I. So go through that. We may try to do an online meeting to go through some of this stuff. Also bring your questions to class, and we will see you next time on Cyber Julio. Have a great day or evening, whichever the case may be.